recording, and welcome everybody to Samsung Internet Office Hours, week 13 or something like that. I don't know. It's the 19th of June, and we're going to be talking with Srushtika from Ably Realtime about real-time web gaming and the prototype or proof of concept that she put together around real-time communications and real-time gaming. It's pretty exciting. Before we get started, I just wanted to, as with all our events, this event runs under a code of conduct, and I posted the code of conduct into the chat, the URL into the chat there. It's our regular Samsung Create code of conduct, which some people on this call may have had a hand in creating. So if you notice any kind of violation of the code of conduct or any kind of issues, or you feel uncomfortable, you can actually use the chat to direct message me or direct message Laura, who's also on the call today, we're both Samsung people, and we'll take care of it. And we have a zero tolerance policy for anything like that. So anyway, that is that. So now I want to introduce Srushtika.
Thank you, Dan, for having me. This feels, as I've been saying, this feels like a really nice way to chat about things we've been working on. So just to sort of introduce myself, I'm Srushtika. I work as a developer advocate for a company called Ably Realtime. What Ably does is provide a real-time messaging infrastructure that you can implement in your applications. So all sorts of things like live collaboration on something like Google Docs, location tracking, stuff like Uber, chat apps, anything that happens real time, you can use Ably as the communication infrastructure for your different clients of your application. So I think recently I've been exploring the idea of games on the web, and I basically started trying out Phaser, which is a really cool framework, WebGL framework built for HTML5 that lets you do so many cool and amazing things for the web. So I basically wanted to use that with Ably to build some sort of a networked gaming experience, and I actually built a multiplayer version of the classic retro game Space Invaders, which basically I wanted to get started with doing something by building this. So that's basically what I'm going to talk about today.
That's awesome. I should have also introduced myself. So I'm Dan Appelquist, and I'm leading the developer relations and developer advocacy group for Samsung Internet web browser. And I think what really. So I attended the event Half Stack a little while back, and which I felt was a really great online event. It was really well run and also had that kind of informal vibe to it. I don't know how you felt about it, Srushtika, as a
definitely with you on that.
Yeah. And anyway, your talk was notable, and and so then I saw you had posted a whole bunch of information about about how you built that onto dev.2, which I'll include a link in the YouTube comment or in the YouTube description later for that as well. And obviously we do a lot of work to advocate emerging web technologies and emerging uses of the web, and interesting new uses of the web. I think web gaming is something that we ran an event a couple of months ago on it, where we had somebody from Good Boy Digital talking about the kind of work that they're doing. We've also, we get a lot. We get involved with things like web WebXR and the immersive web, which are technologies that that really play a role in gaming and game-like experiences. And the other thing that really caught my eye about your post and your talk was the discussion about real-time interaction, because in things like games where you have multiple players, obviously you've got to have a certain amount of low latency in order to make the whole thing work. Otherwise, it just doesn't. It's just not playable, right? And we've played around with other kinds of demonstrations like that, and indeed, we're doing some work right now with the under an EU project called 5G Tours, which includes some VR experiences or WebXR experiences where you have multiple people in the same space, and you've got to transmit the information about the position and angle of view of all those people so that they can see and interact with each other in real time. So anyway, those were it. So it really struck me that we could chat about, first of all, like Phaser and how you liked getting into that, and what you liked and what you didn't like about it, and then what it means for kind of like gaming on the web, and then also secondly, like the real-time communications aspect of it, which of course is related to what you're doing at Ably, but also it feels like from a client perspective, it's new territory for a lot of people. I think web developers aren't used to thinking about that kind of way of building applications.
Yeah. Cool. You've mentioned a lot of things, but before I go on to that, you also did mention WebXR. So I'm just sharing a link in the chat, which basically is a multiplayer VR web app as well, which spins up an avatar for everyone who joins in the app. And as the person moves along their phone with the avatar, with the phone's movement, their avatar moves in the real-time space as well, and it is following the exact sort of networking principles that are implemented in this game as well, just if anyone wants to have a look. But coming back to the phaser part of it, basically, before we start, I think one really important thing to note about phaser is it's been around for a long time, and they have released the version 3. I don't know when exactly, but the version 3 of Phaser is very different compared to the previous versions. And the documentation, the code examples, the syntax, everything is different. It's like a whole other library altogether. So it's breaking changes. I specifically mentioned this in the article as well that you were mentioning before, because with Phaser, there are so many resources online that we can see to, find out how to build a particular thing or two, apart from the documentation. But a lot of those things talk about Phaser 2 or, children of Phaser 2, but there are only like a different set of things that talk about Phaser 3. So that's important to note. So yeah, Phaser basically is a front-end framework, as you would imagine, and it gives us two main things, I would say. One is the ability to render assets on a canvas in a web page according to our game logic, and the second thing is it comes inbuilt with more than one physics engine, which means all those things of what happens when these game objects interact with each other. If I have a bullet that's being shot at an avatar, if that actually touches the avatar's asset, what happens then? And just a mere calculation of checking if the bullet has actually touched the avatar or gone in its territory or like overlapped and things like that. These could be implemented from scratch, but it is just a lot of overhead, a lot of mathematics to write from scratch for no reason. So Phaser gives us really cool methods to manage all of these objects together in general. But what I found really interesting is to basically understand how to make this a multiplayer version of it, because all of those things are cool and good. I say, right, add a overlap method, collision method, move my asset according to this. If I press the left key, the avatar is moved to the left. All those things are really done well by Phaser. um, Actually, let me take a step back. Before I move to networking, let me tell you one more quick thing about Phaser, just to sort of give more context to how it works, so the next part makes sense. So in Phaser, you have classes for each scene. Scene would be anything equivalent to VR that you see at one point of time with a particular background and things like that. And Phaser gives three default methods: create, preload, create, and update. Preload is where you add all of your assets for them to be ready to be used in the game. Create is when you would add those assets onto the screen, or initialize some things, because create is executed once whenever you're running the game. And then there's the update method, which is the key method, which runs in a loop in a high frequency for as long as the game is running.
Right.
And that method is what Phaser uses to have your game objects update according to whatever you write in your game logic. Now, what happens here is, when you now make it multiplayer, Phaser not only has to update the current players, or like whichever client it's running on, that player's objects, but also all of the other players' objects according to their positions that have changed in some other place. So for this whole networking thing to work, there are two major strategies, I would say. One is obviously peer-to-peer. Every player that is present in the room can be communicating with every other player.
Right.
But there are two key problems, or three key problems to this. One is, it gives us an n squared complexity,
Yeah.
because one person generates a message and then it is propagated to everyone else, and then vice versa, etc. So that's not really a scalable solution. The second thing is, it is highly likely that all of these players are not in sync, because if you would like a multiplayer game to actually make sense, that means if I'm seeing the shooter or any other game object to be in a particular position, everyone else should also be seeing that in that particular position at that time. If they are
Right.
out of sync, it wouldn't make sense. One player would be dead, but for the other person, they would still be alive. So that would be a bit of a problem with P2P, because of network latencies and such. It might be out of sync. And the
Yeah.
third major thing is, because everything generally is on the client side, um, people can hack it. People can just modify some things and say, I can never die, and everyone else does, so I win the game all the time,
Well,
theoretically.
but it's funny, the peer-to-peer, the limitations of peer-to-peer. Somebody was saying earlier about how their computer fan was spinning up because of the chat here, right? If you use, so this Jitsi that we're using uses a client server thing, and they're doing they have a server, but there are systems like I use Whereby sometimes for video calls, and that has a mode where you can do it in pure peer-to-peer mode, right? And it can only have up to 4 clients at a time.
Yeah,
Because
exactly. It's not
otherwise,
scalable.
but if you get like four people in a pure peer-to-peer mode, man, your computer is really going to start to melt down. It is
Yeah.
hilarious, actually.
Yeah.
So I can see how that might be a problem. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Those are all I mean, it works pretty well for games like, I suppose, two-player games like chess or something, where you just have 2 players and there's no like a continuous movement sort of thing. You just have like a turn-based thing.
Yeah.
So obviously you can just send something, get something back. It all works pretty well. But for the Space Invaders thing, where basically all the players are moving all the time and the ship is moving all the time and the bullets are being shot all the time, there's a lot of stuff that is being communicated constantly.
Right.
So the next strategy would then be the client server approach, which basically says there would be a game server which would control the game state, make sure it is in sync, and that is this exact game state that is being sent to all the players. And all of the game logic then would lie in the server, um, except for some things which make more sense to be on the client side, that Phaser calculates. So in this game, for instance, I have a game server which does three things. One is, first of all, it acts as an authentication server. So, Ably Ably can be logged into very securely instead of having the API key in the client-side script. And the second thing is that same server also serves my web pages and different endpoints. So if you're on homepage, after you write the nickname, you're transported to another page. So all those basically the Express server thing that server does as well. And then comes the interesting thing of game server, where basically it maintains a global associative array with all the players' information, their XY position, nickname, their, I don't know, alive or dead status, and everything that's associated with each player that's entering the game.
Right.
That is always updated according to what players are sending to the server.
Okay.
And then this object, this array, along with stuff like the ship's position or the bullets and all of those things, this information as a bundle, which I would say call the game state, would be fanned out to all the players at the rate of 100 milliseconds, which means everything that's happening is being updated and propagated at such high speed that it's all in real time. It appears to be live, but there's like 100 millisecond thing.
I see.
In fact, we could actually bring that down a lot if we use a technique called linear interpolation, where we basically bring a couple of bits beforehand on the client side and then move the players or the objects in a way that you would expect the player to go. For instance, if it is going left, the ship is going left, so you would already move it left even if you don't have an update from the server already. So that's a way to reduce the number of server ticks that you're sending, but generally that's all high-speed communication, which is how everything is in sync and everything is in the server and no one can cheat. Server tells who is dead, who is alive, etc.
Right. And you use socket.io library for that, or what did you use exactly?
So I used Ably, of course.
You used Ably. Oh, sorry.
So because socket.io is open source as well, it would be difficult to scale it up to a level that I would like this game to run. For instance, if there are 1,000 players, if I have the limits on my Ably account set, it can still run because it's a distributed network and it would be able to manage that kind of load in production.
Okay.
So also,
but sorry, on the client end,
mm-hmm.
You're using WebSockets, or is that correct? Or
yes,
did I misread?
No. So the primary protocol for communication is WebSockets. But what Ably does, it provides WebSockets communication with a couple of add-ons. So you don't have to implement WebSockets from scratch. We don't have to write a WebSocket server, have that communicate, attach to it, nothing. Just add the Ably library, and under the hood, it still is using WebSockets or like a couple of fallback protocols if WebSockets doesn't really work in a particular scenario. But that's what's happening.
Okay. Very cool. Do you want to try showing what it looks like, or?
Sure. So just a disclaimer, I felt very adventurous yesterday and I wanted to make this game work on multiple threads simultaneously. So I was doing a bunch of changes and I've deployed that work in progress branch. So in case if it fails, please don't mind, but I will definitely share the working one in any case. But right now, let me share a link so you all can play it with me. Let's just see if it works. Okay. Give me just a second. I'm grabbing the URL. I should have had the URL ready. Sorry about that. Okay, here it is. Cool. So I'm going to share it in the chat here. If you can all access this. And also I'm going to share my screen so everyone knows what's happening. Awesome. Dan has it open already. So if no one else, we both are going to play.
I prepared earlier. Right.
So will you create a game room or should I?
Yeah.
Okay. So I've typed in my nickname. By the way, the CSS is horrible. Working on it. Still work in progress. So I have a game link. Let me share it with Dan right here. Dan, that's the game link. I shared it in chat. All right, so that's me. Waiting for Dan to join.
Okay. I think I joined.
With this game room code?
Yeah. Let me try it again.
Okay. Oh, I think I think we both died by the time I went back to it. Okay, let me spin up a new room and let's see if this works. All right, so Srushtika, launch a new game room. Okay, copying and pasting the link here again, the code that is. All right, so I'm going to stay here just to see what's happening. Ooh, there you go. Oh, yeah. I think Marie joined, and by the time you joined, we both died, and the game was over.
Oh.
we can play again if you like.
I love the disruptive element of you don't play this game as the defender, you play as the invaders. That's the other thing that really, I know it's not the point that you were trying to make, but it really, I really laughed when I saw that demo, because I've never seen a Space Invaders implementation where you play as the invaders.
Yeah.
I thought that was really cool. So
it's fun to be the bad on the bad side of things sometimes.
Yes, exactly. Well, who's to say, I mean, right? It's
just on the good things, not on the bad things.
It's all perspective.
Exactly.
Anyway.
So one more thing was I had set the number of people to join before the game started to 2, which is why it started off when the second person joined. But I can change that according to what demo I have. But obviously, that's a work in progress. I should have seen this before.
And all the code, you point to all the code from your article, so it's easy to, which is great. So we can see. So what did you learn from implementing this about kind of the real-time side of it, or indeed about the game mechanics side of it that you didn't know before?
I think one major thing that might seem really minor to some others, but something that blew my mind was, when you click on the keys to move your avatar left and right, it doesn't actually, the screen doesn't actually render those movements according to the button click, but that information is sent back to the server and then is received in the next game tick that is fanned out to everyone. So everything is in sync.
Right.
That's like a general game strategy is what I learned. And I was like, oh, wow, that's like, it's happening so fast that I didn't even realize it's not directly because of my button click right here in the front end. So.
I see. So you don't move until you receive the confirmation back. Okay.
But that message publishing and coming back is so fast that you don't actually realize that that's what's happening.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But in general, like the whole, I think the client server approach of things is pretty cool in terms of a lot of things when you talk about scalability and such, because now, as I said, the client is the entity that is, saving the game state and is publishing to the rest of the players. the communication at any time scales linearly. All the players are speaking with the server only, and the server is then speaking to all the players. So none of them there's no like a star sort of pattern going on. So that's pretty cool, and yeah, makes a lot of things easier.
So so is this going to, because it's using the Ably infrastructure, right? Is part of the and forgive me if I'm not up to speed on Ably, but is part of the promise there that yeah, it's not only for people that are in the same room or in the same geographic location, but actually you're able to collaborate or have this real-time interaction happen across geographies, basically, right?
Yes, no,
Yeah.
definitely. I think so because Ably is a distributed system within its own service as well. It's like a data stream network in itself as a service, which
Right.
means um, if a person is publishing a message to the network within itself, it would take the best route to actually get it to the other side,
Right.
whoever is connected. And if there's a third person who is connected to some via some like from some other geographic location, because an Ably server would be nearer to that person as well, it would go via there. So everyone has this minimal latency thing going on because of this distributed system mechanism.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also just generally things like the reliability of the message or the order of the message, because in a lot of games, if two people almost up to the millisecond of time click on a button, but obviously the one person has clicked the button and the second person has clicked it next, in a lot of scenarios the order of these two messages might get mixed up while it is traveling through this distributed network. But Ably guarantees message order, which means however it was propagated, it definitely is received in that order by all the clients that are subscribed to that.
Right. So we would know who shoots first.
Exactly.
Hannah Greedo.
Exactly.
Yes. Okay. So, um, uh, so on I mean, one of the things that we talked about with Good Boy when we had the meet up with them is the kind of rise of web games. So where do web games fit into the ecosystem of the web, right? And the obviously if you're building like a first person shooter, ultra high definition, real time game, probably web is not where you're going to go right away, right? But although some people who work on WebGL and WebGL2 and those kinds of technologies would say it's coming, but I think a lot of the web games that I'm seeing are kind of these casual games, and there are games that are being distributed by URL in the first place, right? So things that you might encounter when you walk into a space and you scan a QR code, and you're in that kind of game-like experience. Like I've seen a number of museums doing things like this, where it's not necessarily like a game, but they're using game mechanics in some way to help museum patrons or to provide them additional information or stuff like that. Is that what do you think about that? Is that something? Have you come across kind of like interesting ways that web games are being used in this way?
So I think it's so I was looking at this app called Online Town. I don't know if you've heard of it, but basically it's kind of a mix between a game and a video conferencing tool. Basically what it does is you have a map and you can choose to enter one of the maps, and if there are a lot of people in the room, they basically each get a character assigned, and they can walk around that map in blocks using the arrow keys. And basically it's sort of like a uh, virtual communication group. Like when you're at a
Right.
conference or when you're in a party or something, there are a lot of different groups chatting on different topics. So basically virtually you can walk out or in of one of those groups, and this is all on the web.
Right.
and the video is done on WebRTC, and the game must be using something web related as well. So that is something really cool that I saw
Yeah.
recently.
It also brings to mind you know, the fact that they, the web or web experiences like this lend themselves to events and to things like conferences
Yeah,
or spaces that you enter, that kind of thing. You know, so, and especially when we're talking about web games, and I guess our, you know, from a Samsung perspective, we're kind of biased towards things that are mobile specific, right? You're walking around, you see something, you have the opportunity to join an experience, or you're brought into an experience through the web. And I think that that's one of the powers that's one of the powerful aspects of the web, that you don't, that you have this immediacy that you can just jump right in, which also brings up the whole thing about the web needs to be safe, the web needs to be
yeah.
secure, the web needs to be private, that kind of thing. So um, so I should say, are there any questions from, or comments or things like that? You can raise your hand if you want to ask a question. You can type it into the chat, and I'd be happy to kind of like, you know, say it. Or you can, I mean, we have few enough people that you can just unmute yourself and speak. Or, you know, but if you're, so if you're thinking about your question, in the meantime, um, did you, how have you kind of, what other kind of feedback have you gotten basically from the developer community so far about the project?
Um, there has been positive feedback so far because it is on the web as well, and also um, you know, the multiplayer aspect of it, because when I was building it myself as well, there were very few resources that could help me understand the sort of like different architectures involved to make a game multiplayer, and also things like just the practical things, like, you know, the physics is rendered on the client side because of phases physics library. But for instance, in this game, the ship, the velocity of the ship and everything is being handled on the server side. So how do you do that? And in the beginning, if you just like come into it without any gaming background, like me, I was just like, how would you do that if you're not calculating it on the front end? But just simple things like you could simply use another physics engine on the back end, and it need not be phaser. It could be anything that could just, you know, compute the current position according to the velocity applied to it previously, etc., and
Right.
just publish that position, and, you know, basically move the ship along with that position updates that are coming from the server ticks, just things like that. um, those are not really there in a lot of resources on the internet. So I covered a lot of those elements in the game because I found them the hard way myself. So a lot of people have been saying those elements are useful, which is a cool thing, and that was generally my sort of what I was trying to achieve as well. If someone's just trying to get into this, what are the caveats they need to know, if you knew, if it's not already like a given.
So we have one question that came in from Rabia. Sometimes due to PC, I'm not sure.
I think it's network.
Network. Yeah. Okay. So you're reading um, the comment. Can we implement any warning before it happens? That kind of thing. So what do you, do you
So so basically, I think, as I was mentioning before, if there are network lags, which is quite possible, the simple trick could be interpolation. It is done in a lot of applications that we generally use day to day, where it predictively moves the objects before, like, if I mean, without any regard to the next server coming in. It basically predictively implements the positions of the avatar, making the whole experience much more smoother. So it doesn't also make your avatar jump around. For instance, your avatar is at position 10 now, but your next tick didn't come for, say, 4 seconds, but then the avatar is already at position 5 or something. So you would see the jump. But linear interpolation is definitely the answer to sort of make that more cleaner and more user friendly.
And is that part of the library? Is that part of Phaser or how do you do that?
So I haven't explored all of the documentation to see if Phaser provides that innately, but there are a bunch of open source libraries that we can use to basically implement that sort of thing. I can share around some links that later that can be linked to.
So,
but it's really common. It's called LERP, lerping technique, and basically, if you Google it, there are a bunch of resources that help us with it.
So Joe asked, could you explain a little bit more about what ticks are in this context?
Right. So my apologies. I've been using ticks as my own terminology. Basically, what I mean by that is the server is sending the context of the game, which is the game state, as an update to all the players at a particular frequency. And this frequency needs to be high enough that all of the things that are happening or the server is receiving from different players, like their input, etc., is incorporated into that, update that is being sent. So in the current state that my game is in, the server tick is at 100 milliseconds, which means every 100 milliseconds, the game server will publish a new update to the different clients. This could have the same data if nothing changed, or this could have new data if something has changed. Actually, on that, we just released a feature called Delta, which reduces the network traffic by sending only the payload that has changed, the part of the payload that has changed. So you don't have to sort of like deal with processing big amounts of data if nothing's actually changing in those server ticks. So yeah, that's what I mean by server ticks. Should have mentioned before.
Pretty cool. I had a question, which is maybe it's a bit meta, but like the underlying technologies like WebSockets, for instance, are are web standards, and those are the kinds of things that I end up working on quite a bit. And we've got new web standards, web transport, fetch, and other kinds of things that are coming into the platform. Are there limitations to the way that WebSockets works that that you feel, or any other web standard, the way that the web works, is the way that the web works getting in the way of making these kinds of real-time experiences good, basically?
I think that's a really good question, actually, because I've been thinking about that as well, on how to include varied clients to that, which are not only on the web. Which brings us to the question of, if you have different clients who are using this app on the web, it works perfectly because WebSockets is supported and they can properly interact with it. But what if I were to add an IoT-based controller that would then control my avatar, but I'm looking at the output on a screen, which means the screen is now working over WebSockets, but WebSockets would be too heavy and too complex to work on, bandwidth and battery constrained device that is supported by IoT. So
right.
There
like
is
an
another
Arduino or something like that.
Sorry. Yeah,
like
exactly.
An Arduino. Yeah. Okay.
Exactly. So for that kind of thing, there is an equivalent, I would say, very similar protocol to WebSockets called MQTT.
Right.
Which there are a couple of differences, but essentially it implements real-time communication, offers the publish subscribe messaging pattern by default. You have things like topics, where there are generally channels in a WebSockets implementation, but in a normal world, you would have to write a translation layer that would send these messages from the WebSocket implementation to work on an MQTT implementation. But again, because I'm using Ably, it already supports MQTT, WebSockets, and also server sent events. So we don't do any of that translation at all. We just plug in the MQTT, device.
Library.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And just say connect to this channel and it should be ready to work with the existing game without any effort at all.
Right. But how about on the web? I mean, on the web platform itself, are there suggestions that you feel, or are there new standards or that you're keeping an eye on right now for how real-time messaging gets down to the end user, to the client? Or
I can't really think of new standards that are upcoming that I'm keeping an eye on. But yeah, I think even with WebSockets, there is a possibility, even with web clients, that they don't support WebSockets in certain scenarios due to network issues or something. In that case, you would ideally make your application fall back on a different transport that actually supports. Again, I hate to repeat this, but Ably does this automatically as well. If WebSocket is not supported, it goes to XHR, it goes to HTTP2, and things like that. So we don't have to worry about that.
HTTP2 is quite lightweight for that kind of stuff. The other one that comes to mind is WebRTC data channel, which I know that people have used. Is that something that you've played around with at all, or?
I don't have much experience with that, no, but I have sort of tried to basically play around with a demo where, because WebRTC is peer-to-peer, it needs a signaling server for these peers to get in touch initially. And we tried to use Ably as a signaling server to get these in touch. So I just played around with it. But personally, I don't have a lot of experience with that.
Any other comments, questions? Laura? Ada, I saw you were also on the call there.
Hello.
Hi.
So what's next? Where are you going to take this? And what's your ideas for future prototypes? Or are you thinking about taking this, to kind of organizations that are doing this kind of these kinds of applications, or kind of like what's next for you, and what's next for this approach?
I think one of the things I was thinking was, in terms of the game itself, it is kind of never ending, right? You could keep on adding features, sounds, different animations, different things, etc. But what I am really interested in doing now is to take this game from a different angle. Right now, it talks primarily from the front end side, where how you would do animations, how you'd handle physics, and then how you would send data to the server and receive it and then render it and things like that. But if you take it from the other way around, if you look at the complex engineering problems that are solved behind the hood, things like horizontal scaling, idempotency, all sorts of like synchronization of different applications, again, basically automatically scaling these using worker threads or something if it is in Node.js and things like that. So I really want to focus more on that end of things and see how this whole thing can be made more efficient. If it needs to scale for, like, right now, say from 15-member room to a 100-member room, and overall the game supporting 1,000, 10,000 players. These are just numbers I'm saying, but if we were to have such a scale, like what are the things that would come in the way and how people can get around those things, just discussing more on that side of things.
But are there kind of industrial applications beyond, like that where you're thinking about taking the same kinds of mechanics, but you're more going to be applying them on like an enterprise scale or that kind of, is that something you can talk about at all? I mean, I don't want, you can't.
I mean, I haven't explored that side yet, but that's something I'm planning to go next.
Yeah.
So definitely, if we have a future version of this, I'll be happy to talk once I've.
And one other question that came in, Joe asked, is the code open source? Can we make other things with it?
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
I'm going to share a link quickly in the chat so you can all have a look. It's also linked to from the article that Dan has shared in the meetup and also will be sharing later. It's in the chat as well.
Yeah.
So that's the link. You can have a look, fork it, add improvements. I'll be happy to take new things. Yeah.
Yeah. That's, I think, one of the things that, I mean, we take that pretty seriously as well as putting open source out there and letting people remix, letting people have a look at what we're doing. So it's such an important tool for developer outreach.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Just before we, kind of close up, maybe we could talk a little bit about how is developer outreach going for, like, what's your impression of, we've been in everybody here has been in lockdown. We haven't been going out to real events. We've been doing lots of virtual events. How are things going for you? How are things going for Ably? What's your impression of kind of how things are going in the developer kind of community?
So different things, lots of different things there. So in terms of
It's open-ended.
In terms of me personally, I think it's sort of like on the two extremes. Some weeks I'm completely, away from what's happening in the company and building on a project and then, working on a write-up or something. Otherwise, it's completely like meetings from morning to evening, not having any other time to work on some actual thing. I don't mean to say meetings are not work, but if you want to go away and do something on your own, it's really difficult. So that's been kind of hard. I think initially, also because everything is online now, everyone communicates online, and there's a lot of chatter on the communication tools as well. So it's important to sort of selectively mute the different channels and like check them only in a need to basis, rather than having notifications and updates and being pulled to in all directions, because it can be super overwhelming.
I have definitely found that. Yeah, I can resonate with that. We're a team that has been working, roughly 60 to 75% remote and from home anyway. And so I thought when this would be, this would be easy for us. We can, this would be easy for our team. We're going to be, and to some extent it has been, but also what it has, I've found, because everybody is now doing video and every meeting is now a video meeting, that's exhausting.
Yes.
It's actually, and so I've found that has definitely been a factor. Although I think I'm more getting used to it now. I think things are going back up. But like for a while there, I was like, wow, I'm a lot more tired at the end of the day than I have been previously.
Also, I think because there's no clear demarcation between the working hours and personal hours. For me anyway, like I don't have like, okay, 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock, I need to shut my laptop, because I'm doing other things on that laptop as well. So there's no clear line. I'm just like working in the evenings or like waking up at odd hours and things like that. Definitely adds to more sort of tiredness.
Yeah, and that is something that I think a lot of people are trying to battle back against how do they draw those lines effectively, right? Because so like just psychologically speaking, like I have my work desk here is like a drop leaf table, and when the workday is over, I drop the leaf.
Ooh.
Then it's not a desk anymore. It's just a table that I can put things on, right? So it makes it impossible for me to just sit down and say, oh, you know what, I think I'm going to do. No, I can't. So it's not like I can't pick up the laptop and do work anyway, right? But
yeah, I was going to say, because if it were me, I would just take my laptop, sit on the couch, and still be on the couch for the whole day.
for me, it's like a psychological reminder
Yeah.
that, if you are going to do work, just remember this is past work hours now, right? So it gives you a little bit, but I think it's especially challenging when you're working across time zones, and as I think you probably are, and we certainly are, and in web standards also, we're always working across time zones because we're working with people across the globe, and having meetings at odd hours and stuff like that. So it makes it even more challenging. Anything else you want to highlight or mention before we kind of close things up today?
I think that covers everything.
Yeah. Okay.
This was a lovely session.
Any other quick questions from attendees? Anybody? Joe wants to know where you're speaking
that's
next.
what it was. When someone sends a new message on this platform, it just sends a whoosh of air, and I thought someone was unmuting themselves just to do that.
Yeah. So Joe wants to know where are you speaking next?
Oh, I'm speaking at a meetup called Programmed in Pencil on Tuesday.
Oh, cool.
On 24th. Sorry, I don't know if that's Tuesday, but on 24th of June.
Good. Cool.
Yeah. Please attend that if you're interested to know more about this game, because that's the same topic there.
And keep an eye on at Samsung Internet and on our meetup page, which I'll leave a link to in the video, for future Samsung Internet events, meetups, and office hours. And thanks for everybody who came along. Thanks, Srushtika. It was really good to chat, and I look forward to playing more real-time games. Okay.
Awesome.